ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरोः श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च। श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्त राधा कान्त नमोस्तुते। तप्त काञ्चन गौराङ्गी राधे वृन्दावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्तस्वामिनिते नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नाम्ने गौरत्विषे नमः। ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय, ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय, ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Okay, so welcome. This is the third chapter, Bhagavad Gita, Karma Yoga. We are going to start today. So in the last chapter, we see that Bhagavan discusses certain topics like Sankhya Yoga, that is Atma Tattva, then Swadharma or prescribed duties according to the scriptures, then control of activities by perfect intelligence, then Buddhi Yoga and action without desiring results. All these things Bhagavan discussed in the second chapter, which we know is the summary of Bhagavad Gita. But then also Arjuna thinks it is better not to engage in this battle because it is not a good action to him, according to him. And moreover, he considers it as a fruitive action. So he is confused why Krishna wants me to fight this battle. And he thinks that knowledge is superior to action based on the previous discussion. He concluded this. But actually there is no difference. These are the two steps in spiritual advancement. So we see that like most of us, Arjuna could not understand the essence of Buddhi Yoga discussed in the previous chapter. And he thinks that Buddhi Yoga or action in divine consciousness or Krishna consciousness is something like retiring from this active life and practice of penances and austerity in a secluded place. So in the first two verses, we see Arjuna expresses his confusion in this regard. So we will chant them first. Arjuna uvacha jyayasi chit karmanaste mata buddhir janardana tat kim karmani ghore mam niyojayasi keshava. Arjuna uvacha, Arjuna said, jyayasi, better, chet, if, karmanaha, then fruitive action, te, by you, mata is considered, buddhihi, intelligence, janardana, O Krishna, tat, therefore, kim, why, karmani, in action, ghore, ghastly, mam, me, niyojayasi, you are engaging, Keshava, O Krishna. Translation. Arjuna said, O Janardana, O Keshava, why do you want to engage me in this ghastly warfare? If you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? Okay, text 2 we will chant together. व्यामिश्रेणेव वाक्येन बुद्धिं मोहयसीव मे तदेकं वद निश्चित्य येन श्रेयोऽहमाप्नुयाम्. Vyamishrena, by equivocal, iva, certainly, vakyena, words, buddhim, intelligence, mohayasi, you are bewildering, iva, certainly, me, my, tat, therefore, ekam, only one, vada, please tell, nishchitya, ascertaining, yena, by which, shreyaha, real benefit, aham, I, apnuyam, may have. Translation. So my intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. Therefore, please tell me decisively which will be most beneficial for me. Okay. So here the addresses Arjuna used for Shri Krishna as Janardana, Keshava, etc. that we are not discussing again here because we already discussed in while studying the previous verses, especially chapter 1. Their different addresses and their significance we used elaborately, so I am not discussing again. So we see in these two verses how Arjuna's confusion is expressed. And we see that he needs a more systematic outlining of different paths, both for understanding and for acting accordingly. Though Krishna says everything clearly in the last chapter, he has no intention to confuse us, but it is our limited intelligence which Arjuna is representing here. Or we can say Arjuna is helping us so that by a thorough study, we can finally understand our position in respect to the absolute reality. Okay, so with this we will move on to verse 3 where Bhagavan starts answering or eradicating Arjuna's confusion. Shri Bhagavan uvacha Lokesmin dvividha nishtha pura prokta maya nagha jnana yogena sankhyanam karma yogena yoginam. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Loke, in the world, Asmin, this, Dvividha, two kinds of, Nishtha, faith, Pura, formerly, Prokta, were said, Maya, by me, Anagha, O sinless one, Jnana Yogena, by the linking process of knowledge, Sankhyanam, of the empiric philosophers, Karma Yogena, by the linking process of devotion, Yoginam, of the devotees. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical philosophical speculation and others by devotional service. Okay. So as we discussed earlier also, the highest level of karma yoga is nothing but bhakti yoga, truly. And we discussed a lot while studying the verses of chapter 2. And as Bhagavan said in last chapter, verse 39, Esha bhita sankhye buddhi yoge tvamam shruno buddhya yukto yaya partha karma bandham prahasyasi. So how karma bandhan is we can free ourselves from the karma bandhana, that is the bondage of action. So in discussing this, Bhagavan said everything. And tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matparaha vashehi yasyendriyani tasya prajna pratishtita. So tani sarvani samyamya yukta asita matparaha. So there we discussed everything, that matparaha, and how Bhagavan is telling that fix your consciousness upon me and engage yourself in the action. So this is the actual process of karma yoga that will be discussed here in detail. And in this verse particularly, Bhagavan saying that there are two classes of people. One is inclined to understand the absolute truth by empirical philosophical speculations, and the second category, that is class 2, is inclined to understand the absolute truth by service in devotional mood. So this is the two classes of people. Now, religion without philosophy is sentiment and sometimes fanaticism. And on the other hand, philosophy without religion is mental speculation. So we see that Vedeshcha sarve ahameva vidyaho, Vedantakrit Vedavid eva chaham, as Bhagavan says in Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter. So what is the ultimate goal? What is the ultimate goal of all the Vedas and Vedanta? Krishna or Vishnu. So we see the Vedantians who are sincerely searching after the supreme truth gradually come to Krishna consciousness in the end. As we see the example of the self-realized souls like Shukadeva Goswami, like even Vyasadeva ji, we have noticed everybody, they were all self-realized souls, but after that also how they engaged themselves in glorifying the pastimes of the Lord and chanting the holy names of the Lord and everything. So we see that the whole process is to understand the real position of the self in relation to the Supreme Self. So in the path of knowledge, we see one's identity with Brahman is the goal, and the path is discrimination. So it is also an indirect process to reach the highest state of realization. Whereas we see in the path of devotional service, devotion is the way as well as the goal. There is no difference between the way and the goal. By practicing devotion, one can reach the state of supreme devotion. It is only about the perfection. So after having the knowledge of the path of devotion, one has to practice it for the attainment of the goal. So it is a process where everything is connected to Krishna in full Krishna consciousness. So the path of devotional service does not depend on purifying the senses, as we discussed earlier, by a philosophical process of discrimination. So this supreme consciousness or Krishna consciousness or divine consciousness is itself the purifying process and simultaneously easy and sublime. So then Bhagavan says in verse 4, very beautiful verse number 4. Na karmanam nishkarmyam purushoshnute na cha sanyasana deva siddhim samadhigacchati. Na, not karmanam of prescribed duties, anarambhat by non-performance, nishkarmyam freedom from reaction, purushaha a man, ashnute achieves, na nor, cha also, sanyasanat by renunciation, eva simply, siddhim success, samadhigacchati attains. Translation: not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. So Bhagavan says here in this verse that it is not possible for us to escape from activities. Freedom from action cannot be achieved by abstaining from the actions. And it is not possible to attain perfection by renunciation alone. As long as the seed of action in our heart is there, we cannot get rid of the karma. It is only possible when we do all the actions without getting attached to the fruits of action. So as we see, Bhagavan says later in this scripture, Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 18, verses 59 and 60, he says, Arjuna, that you are refusing to fight the battle out of delusion, but you have to act being controlled by the three modes of material nature, three gunas. You cannot escape from performing the actions. And Bhagavan says later that without purification of heart, renunciation is never possible. And purification heart is possible by following the prescribed duties. So when we perform the actions in devotional mood, that is to satisfy the Lord, in Buddhi Yoga, right? applying our perfect intelligence, as we discussed earlier also, our spiritual advancement is possible then. And then only we can overcome great difficulties by little performance of such principle. Swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat, as it is said in the last chapter we saw. So the continuation of this is the next verse, verse number 5. Nahi kaschit kshanam api jatu tishthatya karma krit karyate hyavashah karma sarva prakriti jairgunaihi. Na, nor, he, certainly, kaschit, anyone, kshanam, a moment, api, also, jatu, at any time, tishtati, remains, akarmakrit, without doing something, karyate, is forced to do, he, certainly, avashaha, helplessly, karma, work, sarvaha, all, prakriti jaihi, born of the modes of material nature, gunaihi, by the qualities. Translation. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. As we were just discussing, why Bhagavan, as a conclusion, will tell Arjuna in the last verse. So, this is, we see that it is the nature of the soul that it is always active. It cannot remain inactive for even a moment. The presence of the soul makes the material body move. In contact with Maya, or the illusory energy, the soul acquires material modes and acts by the qualities of material nature through the gross body. Therefore, the prescribed duties are enjoined in the scriptures with a view to purifying the soul. And if the soul is engaged in his natural activities of Krishna consciousness, as we said earlier also, that Sanatana Atma, our eternal religion, is Sanatana Dharma. And that is nothing but Krishna consciousness, because it is all about that. We will be discussing later also. It is all about pleasing the Supreme Lord, whatever, by all our actions. So in this way, he can free himself from the influence of material energy. So here in this connection, we see there is a beautiful verse in Śrimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto, 5th chapter, and verse number 17. Tyaktva swadharmam charanam bhujam harir bhajanna pakvotha patit tato yadi yatra kvava bhadram abhudamushyakim kovartha apto bhajatam swadharmataha. So it means one who has forsaken his material occupations to engage in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord may sometimes fall down while being in an immature state. It is possible, but there is no danger of his being unsuccessful in this process. But a non-devotee who is fully engaged in occupational duties does not gain anything in the end. So we see that sannyasa or any other purificatory process is to help in reaching the ultimate goal of becoming Krishna conscious or reaching the highest spiritual perfection. So, the next verse, that is verse number 6. This is very, very important. This verse is very, very important. कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य यास्ते मनसा स्मरन् इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा मिथ्याचारः स उच्यते. Karma indriyani, the 5 working sense organs. Samyamya, controlling. Yaha, anyone who. Aste, remains. Manasa, by the mind. Smaran, thinking of. Indriya arthan, sense objects. Vimudha, foolish. Atma, soul. Mithya acharaha, pretender. Saha, he. Uchyate, is called. Translation. One who restrains the senses of action but whose mind dwells on sense objects certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So, it is an alert from Bhagavan to all of us. We see here Bhagavan says about the pretenders who are mentally enjoying the objects of senses, while externally the senses are restrained. So they are cheaters. For sense enjoyment, one may act in any capacity of the social order, that is according to the Varna and Ashrama Dharma. And in that case, he must follow the rules and regulations of his particular class, that is the particular social order, to make gradual progress in purifying his consciousness. But making shows of being a yogi externally and mentally searching for the objects of sense gratification is nothing but cheating. So he can speak of philosophy and he can talk about many other subjects also of spirituality, but they are all useless. Why? Because those are coming from an impure mind, and anything coming from an impure mind cannot be pure. So they have no value. So here a question may arise in our mind that while we are chanting the holy names of the Lord, hundreds of thoughts come sometimes in our mind, and we struggle to concentrate our mind in the holy names. So is it also a cheating? No, it is not cheating, because it will be a cheating if one poses to chant to avoid external activities which is needed to be performed. Then it is cheating. But we see that a great sage once said that you don't try to give up your activities, rather let the actions leave you in course of time. Okay. So when we do the actions without hankering for the results, a time comes when actions actually leave us, and we find more and more time for bhajan, that is for spiritual activities. And that is why Bhagavan says in the next verse, we see verse number 7. We will be concluding with this verse. Yastvindriyani manasa niyamyarabhatirjuna karmendriyai karma yogam asakta savishishyate. Yaha, one who, tu, but, indriyani, the senses, manasa, by the mind, niyamya, regulating, arabhate, begins, arjuna, O Arjuna, karma indriyaihi, by the active sense organs, karma yogam, devotion, asaktaha, without attachment, saha, he, vishishyate, is by far the better. Translation. On the other hand, if a sincere person tries to control the active senses by the mind and begins karma yoga in Krishna consciousness without attachment, he is by far superior. So here Bhagavan in these two verses, verse number 6 and 7, he is trying to show us the two extremes and what to do and what not to do. The first one, what we should not be, and the second one, what we should follow. So it is that controlling the senses by the mind is essential, and at the same time doing all the activities for the pleasure of the Lord. So this is the mantra that Bhagavan is giving us, how to live in this world. Actually, the whole scripture Bhagavad Gita is this, how to live in this world perfectly. So a controlled and regulated life, active life, can reach a person to the highest spiritual platform. And this whole Varnashrama system is so designed to help us reach this goal of life. And no external renunciation is recommended by the Lord. Here we see, rather the emphasis is on the internal renunciation. Mind should be unattached, but the senses would be engaged in their respective activities. So we should live in this world in this way, as Bhagavan is saying here. Okay, so with this, we will come to the end. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama,